So now that Avatar: The Last Airbender is over and we've had all sorts of discussions on the pros and cons of that, what's the next thing to take note of for Netflix's upcoming projects? Well, for me, the next animated project they're really working on of note is Ultraman. Yes, Netflix is continuing with their persistently interesting journey into animation, this time with a classic Japanese property. And it's a project that's been in development hell for a long time. Now, Ultraman is an iconic Japanese production, started way back from like the 80s. Did I say the 80s? I meant the 60s. Ultraman is kind of mixed up with the elements of Power Rangers and Super Sentai. It's a whole Tokusatsu brand that's a giant category that, I'll be honest, I'm not that familiar with. My experience with Ultraman specifically is the Shin Ultraman movie that was broadcast once at a Brighton cinema. It's very, I guess camp would be the word to explain it. It's all about this superhero that's secretly an alien disguised as a human, and when he's in his alien form, he's a gigantic metal man. Anyway, one of the actual attacks in the movie, which I think is even weird for Ultraman standards, is he just starts spinning in the air and he kicks a giant kaiju. It literally felt like a movie adaptation of a kid playing with his toy, and there's something charming about it. It's all about giant alien man coming to protect the planet, and now Netflix is helming the project. And whether we're talking about Oscar-winning productions like Pinocchio or completely mid-efforts like their Christmas Carol with a hot Scrooge in it, Netflix has produced a lot of animation at this point, and it's very hit or miss. I say distributed as well because if you've ever actually watched any of these movies, you'll be greeted by an absolute salad of production companies that were hired to make said movies. I mean, they've even got Aardman making movies for them now. They outsource everything, they're just like a platform for animation, though sometimes they will mass cancel all of them, so you know. And that's the thing with Netflix animation. They're trying a lot of daring and interesting projects. Sometimes you got things like Arcane and the Scott Pilgrim anime, for example. And they have some impressive players in their library. Klaus, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, the Willoughbys. Hell, look at Nimona being nominated for Best Animated Film. And let's not forget that they also distributed Sony's Mitchells vs. the Machines. Platforming is the name of their game. But that's kind of the thing. None of this feels like it's actually theirs. This isn't a Netflix animation, it's just Netflix as distributors being the father umbrella to send it out, you know? This new Ultraman movie, it's a collaboration between the Japanese international right owner, Tsuburaya Productions, apparently there's some controversy there as well, and legendary visual effects house, Industrial Light and Magic. And this time, the whole twist is on top of having a little bit of a baseball career in his human form, now he's accidentally been imprinted on by a kaiju baby. It's interesting because it's kind of a spin on the Ultraman format as I understand it, but also this will be a lot of people's introduction to Ultraman. But hey, you know, international productions, I'm all for it. Now, with Disney animation, or Pixar, or DreamWorks, one thing you can say is that there is a sense of authorship from the studio as a whole. Not all the movies look the same, but everyone knows a Pixar movie when they see one. And now with their DreamWorks collaborations like Orion in the Dark and Aardman's Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget, it's interesting that they've got two ex-partners back under the same roof, but they don't actually credit that to the Netflix animation banner due to the contracts from these bigger brands. And so we're continuing this trend of all these movies seeming like animated movies from other studios just put on Netflix rather than movies that Netflix made. Now, to be fair, Warner Brothers did a similar thing to try and reignite their animation arm on the Lego movies, collaborating with Animal Logic. And what leads me to believe that Netflix has adopted that approach is they bought Animal Logic in 2022. The studio behind Lego Movie and Happy Feet? Yeah, Netflix has just straight up bought it now. Like with a lot of their catalog in general, these animated projects have all been acquired by a streamer with a big wallet. Whether it's their animation, Oscar bait movies, the massive purchase of the Knives Out franchise, it gives the vibe of someone buying their way to the top. And in streaming terms, this has worked. None of the other major streamers have come close to the business that Netflix is doing. They got there first, and they weren't going to let the competition beat them at their own game. And after the password sharing crackdown, they've made their biggest profits yet, and a whole era of streaming died with it. kids of tomorrow won't know what it means to have one Netflix account spread across 3 student houses. Even with Aardman, Netflix can find a price for everyone right now, and they have a complete smorgasbord of animated movies to prove it. But is that a bad thing? The big complaint of animation studios is that their house style gets in the way. On the contrary, we've seen Sony break away from their Hotel Transylvania emoji movie past to pursue more interesting projects and art styles, and look how that turned out. Interestingly, one of their more mid-productions, The Sea Beast, which honestly looks like 70 other movies that just kind of exist, was actually produced by another animation arm of Sony called Sony Pictures Imageworks, which is their Canadian animation branch. Why all these subsidiary companies, man? I can't follow this stuff. Thank you for getting halfway through this video. Do quickly check below to see if you're subscribed to keep up with movie news, and let me know your thoughts on Ultraman. Are you aware of Ultraman? Do you follow Tokusatsu themed things? I don't know if my audience is very intertwined with Tokusatsu and Super Sentai and stuff like that, so genuinely I'd love to hear your thoughts on an Ultraman project. If it's new to you, let me know, because it certainly is to me. And now I'll stop rambling midway through. Let's get back to the rest of the video. In essence, this means basically that Netflix pretended to make a movie that Sony is pretending they didn't make. Best they wish they did that with the Emoji Movie. Anyway, this new movie, Ultraman Rising, looks to be no emoji movie. And for those that don't know, Ultraman has been around for a long while. Created in 1966, he debuted in the live-action Japanese series Ultra Q, very much made influenced by the Toho Godzilla movies craze at the time. You know, his rivals are basically kaijus. And not just artistically, by the TV executives who also push the "these giant monsters are doing well" focus on those, rather than the anthology Twilight Zone series the creators wanted to do. Ultraman was a true phenomenon in Japan, and is credited as a vital part of the Tokusatsu genre that would later lead to Super Sentai series like Kamen Rider and of course Power Rangers. By the way, I've said earlier that I'm not really that informed on Ultraman and Tokusatsu in general. I specifically was given 2 rules as a child I wasn't allowed to do. I wasn't allowed to paint my bedroom black. Apparently I was goth at the age of 7. And I also wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers because I copied everything I saw on TV. So I literally know nothing. So, if you wanted a more expert breakdown of Tokusatsu and all things associated with it, do go check out the YouTube channel Keza Henshin. She's a connoisseur of all things Tokusatsu, and she's also my girlfriend. You might see some of my influence in places if you look hard enough. And she's got hundreds of videos on the subject, especially if you're into Sentai. Anyway, whilst Ultraman's a big player in Japan, he hasn't been as prominent in the Western media. As I said, there was one random broadcast in Brighton, and I think it was a fan event. Certainly not on the same level as a Godzilla, but to be fair, Godzilla's a fairly big guy. It's kinda hard to miss him. However, interestingly, Ultraman's history in American media is more tied to animation than his live-action resume in Japan. In 1987, Hanna-Barbera, of all places, produced the movie Ultraman The Adventure Begins for the US market. In Japan, it was also released as Ultraman USA, complete with stars and stripes in the logo to fully certify that this is the grubby American take on their character. Cut to 2024 and those damn Americans are giving it a go again, but this time with the right holders Subaraya Productions directly involved. This is in addition to the Lucasfilm subsidiary Industrial Light and Magic, who famously do visual effects for live-action movies. Back in the day, these guys were so adamant on this point that when part of their computer graphics division wanted to work on the world's first CGI animated movie, George Lucas sold it off as its own company, Pixar. This in mind, the fact that they are co-producing this is very interesting. But to be fair, most of the people working there in the 1980s won't be there now. Anyway, the director for this is Shannon Tyndall, who's had the idea since the mid-2000s, whilst working as the character designer on Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends of all places. After that, we've done this dance before. Prior to Netflix picking up the project, Tyndall was having it worked on at Sony Animation. It was there until 2018 when Netflix nabbed Tyndall, and consequently, his Ultraman project came with it. Announcing the movie in 2021, it is finally getting released June this year. And considering the massive attention of things like Godzilla -1, maybe it's time for another gigantic Toku-esque kaiju monster battle. Just this time with Baby. And yeah, so that's the best part of 20 years since he originally started working on the idea. What's cool about this story is that despite it being a major IP that's been waiting for a major US project, this isn't actually the story of a studio plucking a brand out of the sky and getting people to work on the movie. Instead, you have an individual who developed this idea over 17 years and kept it with him wherever he went. Regardless of how it turns out, it's clear that it's made by individuals who are fans of the source material and has not been a soulless, mandated project, so take that as you will. It may be an extension of an already established franchise, and you could argue it's an unoriginal sequel bait of something being re-hodgepodged and regurgitated out again. But at the same time, this is an individual's passion project, an opportunity for a new IP to reach Western markets, and though it's being produced by a studio that's kind of not really got their own brand in animation, they do fantastically as a platform to get a project out to as many eyes as possible. It's not going to have as big of a wave as Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action, but this is a damn good W for Ultraman, assuming the project turns out well. The new trailer looks great, and I for one can't wait to see it. I'm a relatively new fan, don't even know if I'm a fan yet, but I guess we'll just have to see how things go. But there is a lot of potential that this could make some major waves somewhere, even if it's just to inspire the next creator with a passion project in the field of Toku. But on that note, I'm going to end it off there. For now, my name's been Daz. Thank you for making it to the very end as well. Let me know your thoughts on Ultraman. Are you aware of Ultraman? Do I have a Tokusatsu informed audience? Obviously, I know my girlfriend Kaza Henshin does, but is it completely separate? Have you heard of Ultraman before? Did you think it was a DC hero or something? I'd love to know what people's experiences are of this, because this is new territory for me, and I'm all into getting to learn new things. Anyway, I will see you in a little bit.